What's up, folks? Uh, so yeah, I just got home. I hope that's obvious. Uh, we'll give a minute or so for the YouTube algorithm to do its thing, say hello to folks, get people in here, the usuals. Uh, man, so I worked last weekend on the holiday and stuff to help my coworkers not have to work, and I might have to work this weekend too. And to Ben Finger, man, I wish we could get the live stream opening up with Bentley Pasco doing a TikTok dance. Will never happen. I can't dance. I'm terrible at dancing. Won't happen. Just won't happen. Uh, in case you don't know, I actually used to be a DJ. So I owned my own mobile DJ service when I was in high school and college. So I did like high school dances, youth group dances. I can't dance. I played the music so that other people could dance. That was my gimmick. That's why I went into radio for a while, because I loved it, and I obviously like talking, but I like being a voice, not not something you're paying attention to. Like, I wouldn't want to be in TV, but YouTube's like just right for at least for our nerdy fish hobby. All right, so let's dive in, and let me explain why I chose this topic. I regularly get tagged in conversations about lighting on the Aquarium co-op forum. And I appreciate it, because for the most part, it's people being like, I just follow Bentley's settings and that kind of stuff. And it's all super nice. But there's also been lots of times where people have asked, like, have you tested this? Have you tested that? What do you think about this? Are you testing the Aquarium co-op light? Which the answer to that is no. But I keep getting asked, even though I've said it a few times. So let me talk about designing a light, because I think, often it's like, how good is this light versus that light? And maybe this will give you an idea of, beyond what I've said positively about the lights I have tested, the things that I look for in a light compared to, say, what other people like Green Aqua, for example, talks about a lot of your like really high-end lighting. And, Corey is building a light, right? So what if I were in those shoes? If I could build a light, what would I build? Because I think it's a relatively good question. So the first thing that I look at is I would actually do away with all the multicolored LEDs. And you might be like, but how do you control your spectrum? How do you do this? How do you do that? You only need to control those things when all those extra colors are present. And for some people, you might want to push more red or more blue or whatever. I look at this from the perspective of, keep in mind, I'm a rainbow fish keeper, and I love planet tanks. So I have fish that naturally look best in sunlight. Well, sunlight isn't like this many red LEDs and this many blue and a couple green and a fuchsia and right? It's white. So I would do my best to get very high quality 5600K, that's the Kelvin temperature, so to our eyes, what we consider daylight. Basically, there's a spectrum of daylight, but dead on, like noon sun, is effectively 5600 Kelvin, or 5600K. So my goal would be basically almost like the light that I use to light myself here. I can control the Kelvin temperature, but every LED is the same. So if I want that light to be more of a like tungsten is what we call it in like lighting for photography and stuff, that more orangey warm tone, I would shift there, right? I can control the Kelvin. And if I cared about changing hue, that would be the way that I would do it. I would get LEDs very similar to what is being used in this light here. Now, granted, the light that I use to light myself for this is way more powerful than you'd ever need on an aquarium. If I put this thing over the top of an aquarium, it would be very bright. Very, very bright. So let's talk about that. Because, right, Mike Kinseth in chat is like, how much power would you want for a 40 breeder? So if we look at most of the PAR ratings, what we consider mid and high light, and you're going to be shocked by this, but I actually have a PAR testing light coming out this Saturday. I got a hold of a PAR meter. So spoiler alert on that bad guy, but I think you'll like that video. I think it's really relevant to this conversation. You don't need 200 PAR on your substrate after like 16 inches of water, right? You don't need that much. But there are some that are very, very strong. A great example of an incredibly strong light would be something like the Chihiros Vivid or the UNS Titan. But these are lights that are like $500 a piece. That's really expensive. And for me, that's too expensive for a user. I don't think that any person should need to spend that much money on a light. And a lot of it is the aesthetics and the way they design them. And you can do things to make sure that that build quality is still high, but that it's not exorbitantly priced. So one of the things I would do is I would aim to be right about the same cost of a Fluval plant. Similar power? No, slightly more. You can do that if all the LEDs are one kind of LED. You don't have to wire any specific pattern. Every LED is the same. That will bring down some of the cost. Now keep in mind, my goal is not to have multiple lights on a big tank. I want you to have one. So if we look at how the plant is priced compared to other lights for similar larger tank sizes, it becomes pretty economically friendly in the United States and Canada. I know that, like, for Australia and a few other places, they're really expensive. And that's a problem of, like, import laws and all that kind of stuff. That I can't fix, right? Other than, like, you build them in Australia. But you'd have to have the right demand and blah, 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 blah. A lot of complications there. Now, we can look at lights like JC&P, right? Fairly powerful, not very expensive, but you lose certain things. So what do you have to sacrifice to not make that light $500 and instead make it, for like a 40 breeder, say $150? Or less if you can make it less, right? That the goal is to make it as affordable as possible for people. But when you start cutting too much, you lose quality. So an example would be like Corey is working on getting his light UL certified, if I remember correctly from the last live stream I watched. And that costs extra, right? But it lets you know that it has a certain amount of protection, and you can get your water resistance ratings and stuff like that. Those things are important because it tells you long term that the light is a higher quality bar and can handle certain accidents. You accidentally drop your light in the tank, you don't want it to short out and electrocute all your fish. You want it to be able to be like, oh, I dropped my light. It's been in there for 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Get it out, dry it off and have it still run without any issues. This is important. Those little ticks of quality matter so much, because the difference between that functionality and that quality bar is the difference between a light that lasts you a year versus a light that lasts you 5 years or more. One thing that I think you'll learn about Saturday's video, if you guys watch it, is that the amount of par in some of the lights is not as important as you might think. Some par is important, but maybe it's not as important as it often gets stressed. So what I mean is, most of the plants that need that high light naturally grow taller. With some exceptions, carpeters are a different one, right? But if you make it so that you don't need lots of multiple color LEDs, you instead have one strong, singular LED type, you cut some cost away. When it comes to laying those LEDs out in a factory, when it comes to part costs, things like that, you save a little bit of money long term, which means that the overall cost of your light comes down, so you can offer that light cheaper to your customer. But you can still provide higher quality bar. So in the end, what would be my goals? At maximum power, the light would be able to provide 100 par to the substrate at 24 inches. So 24 inches of water, 100 par to the substrate. Pure white. Pure white. But I should be able to dial the power down and up. Right? If I have a shallow tank, I don't want to have this ludicrously powerful light on top of it. I need to be able to dim it down. Does it need to be app controlled? No, if we can find a reasonable way to have controls on the light. However, if by making it Bluetooth or Wi-Fi enabled, we make that more water resistant because we can have better sealing out the outside because we don't have to have buttons or a controller on the cable, we're going to go that route. Do you need a super complicated application? No, the Fluval Smart app is not super complicated. From the perspective of coding and programming, it's visually appealing, but it's not very complicated. Right? So you can have a simple app, you just need it to be functional. And be easy to use. So the goal is get quality and reliability number one. Features kind of number two, but the features that matter the most are dimming it. Controllable dim in one way, shape, or form is more important for the flexibility of a light than almost anything else. And that's just because it allows your one light to be multiple sizes, but be able to go on all sorts of different tanks based on their height. Because if you have a 24-inch tall tank, okay, heavily planted, doing this with a little CO2, take it to maximum power. No CO2, lightly planted, 50% power. Right? We can easily make suggestions that are simple for the user to just dial in. Right? We don't want hyper complication. The next feature that to me is important is ramp up and ramp down. And let me explain why. Ramp up and ramp down does a couple of things. One, if you have shyer fish, that light slowly coming up and slowly going down is less likely to scare them. So for those who like to have your why is the word escaping me right now? Rimless. I was like, I don't know why I was spacing on the word rimless. If you want to have rimless tanks and not have lids, right? You can do this a lot easier when you have a nice ramp up and down. Second reason why we do this. Ramp up and ramp down helps us to simulate seasons. So for fish that need to have certain weather conditions to breed, that light can help simulate that. So we can set it to have a longer or faster ramp up to simulate something more like fall, where you have a longer sunrise and sunset, versus something like summer, where very quickly you get to super bright light, and then it stays very bright for a long time until sunset, and then it kind of just like falls off quickly, right? You'll stay pretty bright for a while. There's a long taper where it stays bright, and then kind of falls off quick, or at least in the Pacific Northwest. And you can do that similarly in other places. Good question. I want to answer it while we're talking about this. So from Stephen P., why in the heck do plants go crazy in the colored lights in the first place? Good question. So a lot of those lights help trigger certain things, because there's multiple types of chlorophyll compounds. There's A and B is the simplistic version, but there's more complexes of this, right? That respond to certain colors of light better. However, if you have a proper daylight spectrum white, it contains all colors of light. Providing specific colors of light matters very regularly, or very rarely rather, regularly, very rarely, in the sense that there are certain cases that where certain plants do really, really well, and that's about absolutely maximizing growth and caring nothing about the appearance of color. So that's where you push lots of red, sometimes purple for some like non-aquatic plants. Most commonly for those out there, yeah, that's cannabis is the most common one where this kind of happens, but it can be done with certain other like indoor microgreens and things like that. It's very common for like vertical farming to use certain light. Most of our aquatic plants, they really just need white light. There's some interesting studies that have been done as far as plant growth, but nothing is like too hyper tuned to aquatics. But I've seen some interesting stuff for folks that run like full true aquarium. So like the Georgia Aquarium or the Seattle Aquarium, like the big ones that you would go visit, right? As opposed to like, Jim Bob's fish room that we call the aquarium. So you don't need to push that light, but it can help you. Like red light will help plants flower. But if you have true daylight spectrum light coming out, that's everything. Red's in there. And if you have like this light that I have behind me, right, that I use for videography, the ability to change it, you could bring that color temperature down to where it gets warmer and there is more yellow tone. It takes away some of the blue tone out of that 56K, that really good sunlight style light, right? That daylight appearance. And keep in mind, Kelvin temperature is how it looks to our eyes. You're augmenting the light in a way, but there's a potentiality that that type of LED versus just a standard 5600K costs more. If you look at one of the more powerful lights out there, the UNS Titan, it's basically just pure white, but extremely powerful. I didn't like par test that. I will long term later, but I would have had to do some like weird monkeying around to do that. Now, some other things that matter to me. One of the things that a lot of people hate, and I hate too, on the Fluval, is the little part that mounts to your tank. It stays so flat to the tank. There's no easy way to raise it up. There's an easy way to fix this. You just include a riser, right? You allow the light to have like hangers for people that want to hang it. But then you can easily include risers that just neatly and simply raise the light up. And you can make them adjustable. That's surprisingly simple. Especially if you're using something like aluminum or even like 3D printed plastics these days. You can do this kind of stuff. But aluminum makes it simpler because you can do it much thinner and lighter. That gives you the ability to raise and lower the light for aesthetic appearances. You want a really reasonably thin profile. You don't want some big, chonky, gnarly looking thing, right? You want something that looks thin and simple. I think you can get away with either like a brushed aluminum color or like black. But either color tends to look fine to most people. You don't want something too weird like white or blue or anything like that, right? But what matters in the end is reasonable price, high quality. If I were to build a light, these are the things I would do. Because my goal would be get reasonable amounts of power that's controllable, but I don't need crazy control. If I keep everything the same color temperature, and I'm not messing with blue LEDs, and I've got this amount of actinic and this much red and orange and yellow and fuchsia and chartreuse, and right? We don't need all that nonsense. You just need good quality white light. That's all you need. The average person is not like Tom Barr growing all these insane plants with this nonsensical, like super high power, custom built old school tube light system where it's like, okay, well, I got one bulb of this and two bulbs of that and three bulbs of this and this and this. And you're pumping 700 watts of light at your one fish tank. We're not designing the light for that person, right? We're designing the light for people like me, and for people like you. I keep fish. I keep plants. Maybe I want to aquascape a little bit, but if I want to aquascape a lot, because that's my jam, it has enough power to let you do that. It has a bright white appearance, so all of the colors look correct, right? You're not looking at something and it's like, why is that so yellow toned? It's one of the biggest complaints I hear about the flue ball is the warm cast to its light. It has a yellow appearance. Now, me personally, doesn't bother me too much. But several of my good friends locally, that's the reason they won't use that light ever. It has so much better quality than almost every other light that they've used. But because of that color, they can't stand it aesthetically. 5600K? Perfect. Good, bright, white light. That's all you need. There you go. That's how I design a light. Now, there's lots of options we can get into, right? Like you could program siestas and all this kind of crazy stuff. In software, it's easily there to make adjustments over time. Because if the light can handle a ramp up and a ramp down, it can handle anything. If it can do it once, it can do it 100 times. It's all about the software long term. The software is actually the easy part. That's the funny thing. A lot of these lights that don't have apps or do have apps, the software is the easiest part. It's the initial engineering of the light that's difficult. Once you get that right, it's easy. Easy, easy, easy. So, when I answer a few questions, and then we'll get to like full open questions, as usual, guys, at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see if we want to talk about light, we want to talk about plants, fish, my hat, which for the person that asked, this is a Tacoma Rainiers hat. That's the local AAA ball club for the Seattle Mariners. I literally just grabbed this like running out the door to work, and I didn't grab the hat I kind of wanted to wear tonight because I don't know that I've worn it on the stream yet, because it was literally 2 minutes before stream when I walked in my door and like gingerly made my way upstairs to where I stream from. Oh man. Okay, so we'll toss some questions because there's one in here. So there was a question from Gary Duncan: is it 5600K or 6500K? So it's everywhere from, I think it's like 5000K to 6500K is considered daylight, but typically lighting from the like true perfect daylight, perfect in big quotation marks, right? This is Kelvin. This is how things appear to our eyes, is 5600K. And you'll find that most commonly, typically in photography and videography, is where they look for that specific Kelvin temperature. 6500K is ever so slightly blue. It's almost imperceptible to the eye, but if you see like something properly lit with 5600K versus 6500K, and you have a really good eye for color, you'll be able to see the difference. It's very minute. Keep that in mind. You could, in theory, if the LED diodes at 6500K were reasonably cheaper for similar quality compared to 5600K, alternate to 6500K, because it would make sure that you're getting still that high quality bar, but getting something a little bit more affordable long term, so that you can bring the overall price down to make your light that you're selling an even better buy to your customer, right? And I want to keep this in mind. Let me talk before I get to questions. I do have to say one thing. I have to talk more. When don't I, right? But so let me also explain part of why I went on this diatribe that I forgot to explain. Before I got into tech, right, because I work as a software and hardware test engineer, I used to work in flooring, and specifically my last job before I got into tech was a merchandising coordinator, which that sounds terrible, right? But what it meant in the flooring industry is that I was working with several manufacturers as one of the main people designing a proprietary product line for the company I worked for. So I was directly talking to folks in China, manufacturers within the United States, Canada, down in Brazil, about sourcing and certain quality requirements for making flooring that would be branded and packaged as our company's proprietary product. So similar to how, like, say, the Aquarium Co-op gets their sponge filters made, right? And it has all their packaging and all that stuff, but it's made by a company that they work with in China, right? I was doing the same thing in flooring. So the only reason why I kind of also got on this diatribe is that part of it is I've done this kind of stuff in a different industry in the past. So I have experience building products, and it's very, very fun. Yeah, so Alex, the Secret History, my buddy, what's up? 5,600 to 6,200 the range for blue sky days. Yes, that's actually absolutely correct. I try to go slightly more general because, like, daylight has a slightly wider range, but like a perfect blue sky summer day, right, 5,600 to 6,200, it's a very small range. However, 5,600 is like the absolute perfect target when it comes to most true, like, pure white light, if that makes sense. All right. Let me see if I missed any questions that I feel are very important. The Zen Ginger. I had a canister flood out my stand and the AC adapter box got wet. My Phoenix went out. Is there any chance that it will work again when it dries? Or most likely fried? So, I've had experiences with this both fashions. I had a 4-foot Phoenix light, the Stingray specifically, that had something similar happen when I had a rack of 10 gallons that I was lighting with this one thing, and one of them broke a seal. It fried. But I've had a smaller Phoenix that I still use on my 29 gallon in my warm grow, whatever you want to call it, room, right? The one that has the Goby mansion. It had this. So it's kind of a coin flip. Just hope that you get lucky. But yeah, definitely make sure you dry it out really thoroughly. If you can, put it right by a dehumidifier and let that dehumidifier help pull extra moisture out of the light and its workings. You might get it to come back. You might not. Hopefully you do. Right? Paul Soltero. I do lighting periods early AM, midday, and night when I'm home to look at the fish with the siestas in between. Would you put multiple daily ramp up and ramp downs in your control app? Yes. Short way to put this. Yes. And the only reason why is just it's a little It's a little safer long term for when you deal with more skittish fish. Like I have the running river rainbows, for example. They when a light just clicks on or clicks off, they get really scared. My Leopoldi angels, if the light just turns on or turns off, they freak the f out, and I get paranoid every time that one's gonna jump. So ramp up and ramp down is really good just to make your fish feel a little safer. When they have an easy ramp up and ramp down, even if it's like you only take half an hour, if it starts dim and slowly raises up, it kind of tricks them into thinking it's a day. The day is starting, right? And for certain fish who are like morning spawners, like rainbow fish, this can help reinforce that habit too. And it's easy to program that. Again, if you can do it once, you could do it 100 times. It's all about just knowing how to write your software correctly. It's really what it comes down to, because your firmware controller that's on your light just sends it commands. It's the software controlling that and sending the signals to it. In the end, or it's like the software saves a setting onto the local memory, and that memory controls it locally, which is what happens in like the Fluval light, so a Bluetooth-based light. And I'm going a little like tech nerdy there, but it's what I do for a living. I can't help it. Bryce Downs, I just need it to grow Crips. If all you want to do is grow Crips, man, that Aqua Sky is pretty dang good. I mean, you could do the same with the plant. It just depends on how tall your tank is overall, but yeah. That Aqua Sky, man, I've had some amazing success with Crips with that stupid thing. Joe Davis, what color would we want the trim? Are we talking about like blood orange Rotala, I'm assuming? So blood orange should be kind of blood orange. You typically, because there's like orange juice, which is more of an orange color. Blood orange is very typically a very deep red, right? And there's multiple ways that you do that. One is typically by pouring a lot of light at something. Two is by lightly nitrogen starving it. That nitrogen starving it ever so slightly is what helps accelerate that response in the plant that brings out that red coloration. Which is that red coloration in most plants, by the way, it's a response to light. It's kind of like how our skin tans when we expose it to the sun too much. Plants do the same thing. They go red when they're getting overexposed to light. And if you nitrogen starve your plants, that accelerates the rate at which they do that response. So for the most part, you'll see those highly aquascaped, beautiful reds in tanks. It's because they dump a ton of light on their tanks, so they require a lot of maintenance. And also, they run a very lean nutrition cycle so that they're not very high in nitrates. And this helps accelerate that ultra deep red response in the plants that they're trying to get it out of. The other plants will stay green, of course. It just depends on the species of plant. Whew. I know, long and diatribe, right? It's what you guys kind of get used to. Sometimes I worry, like, if somebody were to show up this stream for the first time and just hear me like ranting for 10 minutes answering a question and be like, what? How does this even work? Brian K. You might have got me in trouble. I was putting that out there. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I actually said, in response to your message you sent me, I actually sent an email recently. So just letting you know. So I was wondering, do you have any suggestions for plants that like it warm and suck up nitrates? I'm actually considering trying water hyacinth. So you're talking about probably going to like discus levels of temperatures, right? A little warmer, where you're talking that more like 83 plus, more like 86. It gets tough. I have seen, a lot of floaters tend to handle temperature really well, but they don't handle too much flow. And floaters like really just annihilate nitrates. That's what they're really, really good at. You can also get some swords that will handle higher temperatures, but they're not as big of nitrate hogs until they get massive and have these huge root structures. Beyond that, it starts getting tough. Like some of your... I'm trying to think if it's Water Sprite or Water Wisteria that does better in heat. I think it's Water Sprite. God, it feels wrong. There's a broadleaf version of Water Sprite that comes from India, and I'm spacing on the name. I still have it. I grow it regularly, but I'm spacing on the scientific name. We call it locally just broadleaf Water Sprite, but it's specifically an Indian variant, so and that can naturally handle a lot warmer temperatures. I don't know that it's going to handle like 86, but 80 to 83 it can definitely handle, because I've had it at those temperatures and it's been fine. It's just about, it's ultra nitrate hungry, so it really has to have consistent nitrates or it gets very, very angry. Right? Alien Fetus 420. What a name. Strip light, spotlight, or standard light. What do you mean by standard? That'd be I'm curious about that. So, in general, what our goal is to create something that is really economically friendly toward a customer. So typically, those tend to be a more strip light design. That design's a lot easier to build, and it spreads more light easily. Spotlights don't spread light very well, so you typically need multiple of them. Now, if you can get them down in price correctly, to where like buying 2 of them for a 4-foot tank is more economical than buying 1 Fluval at 48 inches, right? Then you're fine. But the problem is most of those spotlights, especially to get your Kessels and get that cool effect, they actually require a very specific set of designs and power that makes them very expensive. There's cheap ways to do it. I think, who is it? Is it Kevin Novak? I think Dr. Novak that has like shown off a like $13 or something like that light where you just do some small fixture work to it and you can kind of make your own like do-it-yourself Kessel. It's not quite as powerful and controllable, but it does the trick for a lot of tanks. But yeah, in general, you're probably going to find that in order to get enough light at a reasonable price, it's either going to have to be a strip or a box style light, to where like think like the ONF flat one, for example, or even the Twin Star, where it's a little thinner and wider. That's most likely what you're going to be looking at. But the big thing is making sure that you're not getting something so wide that it spreads the LEDs too much that you now hamper the amount of power without adding additional cost for more LEDs. You play this like really careful game when it comes to light engineering, and I want to be very clear. I don't have a background in engineering lights, but I've played with enough of them to understand like what you kind of can and can't do without investing more in your raw hardware cost. Because otherwise you could have those big, like, crazy, super powerful LEDs like in the SB Reefs and similar like that, or some of those, like, super powerful grow lights that are out there. And those things, like, have a ludicrous amount of power, and they're big circular LEDs. But they also have an expense to them in order to build. Alex literally just covered a low-tech orange, red, pink, purple Rotalis. There you go. There you go. I was in traffic, so it took me an hour and a half to get home today. I hated it. Gary Duncan, have you ever kept Sunset Rainbows Melanitania parva? Where do they fall on your favorites list? Yes, I've kept them. So most of the ones I've kept, they're only like really good coloration in the morning, and they lose a lot of that color over time. I've also seen, depending on the food you're feeding them, they tend to have more issues with like, and this is probably just my fault or something like that, but I've seen more issues in like getting abdomen bloat in them to cause constipation issues than I have in some of the other Melanitanias. It's probably just that I'm giving them too much protein and not enough like days with like a spirulina mix or something like that to help push everything through, right? But I like them a lot. I think they're really cool fish. I just wish that the females had some some more color, because like the males look amazing, right? I've had some incredible parvas, and you can't take your eyes off them. They're so bright. But now you're getting more of like the Calimoisi, the Clasioensis, and things like that have those orangey or like brownish orange tones to them that just look better, and their females have more like interesting patterning and color to them. So it's one of those things where like I think as a more attainable rainbow, until you start going like crazy and looking for specialty rainbows, parvas are really great. They also only get a certain size, so you can keep more of them in different aquariums than you could with like some of the bigger rainbow fish. But they have some like color limitations that like unless you're a big rainbow fish nerd, you might like look at them and be like, well, that kind of sucks. I want to watch my fish be super colorful when I come home at night, not only in the morning when I'm not there because I left for work, right? Or something like that. I think that's the only downfall to the parva. Otherwise, I think it's a really great rainbow. Like, to be fair, I think almost every rainbow is a really great rainbow. There's some of the Australian rainbows, they're not as popular in the hobby, mind you. The ones that I'm thinking of don't have quite as much color until they get like old. You have to get them like 4 or 5 years old, and then they like really look great. But that whole time before then, it's just kind of like, eh. But yeah, I think I would rather over a parva. If I'm like a hyper crazy person, I'm either going to look for the Clasioensis or the Calimoisi, or I'm going to go yellow toward like the Herbert Axelrodi and get the yellow rainbow, because both male and female have color in that fish. So you get a lot more color. It's not that nice orange, that kind of like Sunny D coloration almost, but you know, it's still a bright yellow with red fins. So you kind of get a little more color in a sense that you have two colors rather than just one. Just my take. I think they're a great fish, though. If you have them, enjoy them, because I've got 2 left. I think I have a male and a female, if I remember right. Maybe I only have the male. Out of a small batch. I lost a lot of mine when I had eggs from Gary Lang. I lost like almost all of them to the eggs not hatching. I think I only had like 4 hatch, and I think it was only a pair that really made it very far. But yeah, I mean, they are a really cool fish. Once they get happy and they show their color, they look amazing. Adam, I'm having trouble with my GLA regulator. Interesting. I will set it to 3 bubbles a second, but then come back an hour later and there is no more flow. Really? So most of my experience with my GLA is you need to sit there for about a couple minutes and watch the check valve, or not the check valve, but watch the bubble counter, because like you'll initially open the pressure up and it'll go crazy, and you'll dial it back down, but you can very easily dial it back down too much. There's kind of a, once you start going, and if you have multiple taps, this is especially more common, you'll want to get them all going and then very, very minutely change them and watch them for a couple minutes to make sure. Because once you dial it in once, it's fine every time it turns on if it's got a solenoid. I've been running my GLA for like 4.5 years now, and I literally just have it set to the same amount every time, and it does perfect. So I'd be curious. It might be one of those things where I almost need to like watch video of like how you're setting it up. The only other thing that could be happening is if you don't have enough pressure, if you set the PSI too low. So typically in most of the GLAs, you want a dual stage where you can control the pressure coming out, and it should be just like a big screw, right? And you want to set that typically 30 to 35 PSI. I run mine 35 on purpose because I like that little bit of extra pressure, because it makes it much easier with the needle valve to dial it in at that like 2 to 3 bubbles a second range. That's my personal experience with my GLA, which I love that thing. It's built like an absolute tank. But if you're still having problems, potentially there could be something wrong with the needle valves. But yeah, one of the things I'd look at is your pressure, what you're operating that at. Brian K, yeah, 82 to 86 for pleco tanks. Sure. Keep in mind that like your certain plants your plecos are going to eat. Baby plecos love Namen on certain plants, so just be aware for that. that it can limit the plants you keep, and floating plants actually tend to be better because of that purpose, right? Because they actually have a better chance of surviving because the leaf structure isn't as exposed to the plecos and where they're going to swim around. Damian Graves, is there a LumenPar Calculator? Or Greaves, I'm sorry. I don't know. I would guess, but I don't know that like Lumen and Par directly translate as easily as it might sound like they do. Because keep in mind, like Par is a specific range of usable light by plants. It's the range in the nanometers that the plants actually use, and then lumen is just like overall type of power rating, because what it's like lumen is effectively candle power, right? I stopped looking at lumen a long time ago because lumen can be a little deceptive when it comes to paying attention to what's usable by plants, and I care more about that part because I'm a plant nerd. Who'd have thunk? Brian K is like, don't forget the M Susai. Yeah, that's another one. I mean, there's actually quite a few. I had a conversation with Gary Lang recently about this over the phone, actually. Yeah, I talk to that man on the phone every once in a while. Actually, I should probably call him soon. It's been a while, but it was like he generically said, oh yeah, there's a bunch of those orange with purplish kind of fin fish nowadays because they found quite a few of them in different locations. And they all have like some little small difference to them, but there's a surprisingly number now. Alex, geez, why are you trying to take over my channel, man? I found that the CREE brand LED diodes on floodlights at 5500 or 6500, that's a pretty strong start, that put out the same energy as a Fluval 3.0 per square inch of light surface, but have no settings other than full on. Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest problem is a lot of those floodlights, you know, they're designed for human use, not for aquarium use, so it's just like gigantic powerhouse or nothing at all. But there's ways to control that kind of stuff. It's extra cost, and most of those floodlights are designed to be, you know, when we start talking about lighting that like we humans use in a garage or something, unfortunately, price point tends to win. It's really hard to sell people on quality, but it's amazing how people will like look at their fish tank and be like, wait a minute, well, is that $60 Chinese light going to last me more than 3 months? Because if not, then I'll pay the extra amount to get this light that'll last me this 5-6 years, right? You know, you get those differences pretty easily in aquarium lighting, thankfully. Whereas very frequently, we simple-minded humans will look at a light for ourselves as opposed to for our beloved fish. Be like, yeah, but that light's just as powerful. It only cost me $15. It's only going to last 4 months. Yeah, I only need it for like 2. You know, you get dumb stuff like that happens all the time. So often those lights like cut as many corners as they can in order to get their price point down, but deliver an amount of power in a certain amount of space. It's the game we play. Skeep skeep. Bentley, can you give us a fish room tour soon? No. Well, let me explain why I haven't done a fish room tour. One, it really hasn't changed since the last one. Other than I've tested a bunch of random stuff, and I have all sorts of random junk all over my fish room now. My fish room's like a personal minefield. Mostly just because I've had limited time. The biggest thing, let me actually like be more serious about why I haven't done a fish room tour. The next fish room tour I do of myself, for my own fish, I want to have it done to a certain level of quality when it comes to filming. And plain and simple, I have not had the time to film it the way I want to. Which is to say, to get a lot of B-roll, to get some very good like macro B-roll and things like that, in order to I want it, if I'm going to do a fish room tour, I really don't want to just be me standing in front of one tank and a static image. I want you guys to have something that looks gorgeous the next time I do a fish room tour. And it's kind of like a personal challenge too, because I want to take the time to edit something amazing. In order to edit something amazing, you have to have, unfortunately, a lot of footage. And currently, my work schedule just does not allow that. I would probably need to take the time that I make a video in a given week. I would probably have to stop making videos for almost a month to get enough time to film it the way I want to film it. That's how much effort I want to put into my next fish room tour. I want to go from my previous bar, which I think is just okay, and go to like almost Jimmy level, right? I really, really, really want that to be that next tour, to be that ultra high quality bar when it comes to watching it and being like, yeah, I will watch this hour-long fish room tour because it's beautiful. And that could be considered me being greedy, right? Because I'm doing it out of my own personal want. But part of the thing is, YouTube is my hobby. This is my fun, right? This is my fun of my fun. So if I'm doing it just because I haven't done one in a while, it loses that enjoyment factor of putting it together. Right now, even though I can't do everything exactly how I want to because of time constraints, I'm still enjoying everything I put out. I get to enjoy everything I'm making. Every topic is something I really enjoy talking about, whether it's a product, whether it's plant tips. There's an upcoming thing about par testing. Like, these are all things that I've had fun doing. And I don't want to stop that, because the second that this starts to feel tedious, I won't enjoy it, and it will be obvious in my video. And I can't have that, because this has to be fun for me. If it's not fun for me, it's not worth it, because I'm a crazy person. But more just like, I work a ton, so I don't want this to feel like more work. I want this to feel like it is my hobby. This is how I relax, by putting together a cool video talking about fish stuff to other fish nerds. Like, that is, to me, how I get my relaxation. Other than, spending time with my dogs and my lady and all that kind of stuff, right? But this is my little hobby on the side that I get to enjoy and have fun with. Might not be the answer you want, but it's the answer that's the most truthful. All right. Bryce, what do you think about Australian desert goby and Australian rainbow tank? I feel like the male gobies would swim around with the rainbows and look really cool. They come from similar environments, so should be fine. I don't know. I'm trying to think if they're specifically in the same water system as a specific rainbow fish. I'd have to look that up, because I don't pay, even though I have all sorts of stuff from Angfa, I don't look too much at the gobies, because me personally, gobies just aren't my jam. They're cool fish, but it's one of those things where I look at gobies and I'm like, I'd kind of rather have this ground dweller, which for the most part tends to be Corydoras, because I love the way they swim. They just they got that little wiggle to their butt, and I find it freaking adorable. But gobies, the real goby freak is, that also likes rainbows, is Jimmy. Jimmy from Aquarium Co-op likes gobies, likes rainbows. But I'm pretty certain there's a couple of the desert gobies that live with specific species of rainbows, and it would be kind of cool to have them interact in a pseudo natural environment, right? In the sense that you could keep them in your own fish tank, but know that they live together naturally, so you are kind of emulating nature that way. CJ Clay, is any of you fish plant savants ever deal with Anubias pangolino? Yep. It's small, but surprisingly durable once it settles in. It likes good light to start, but once it settles in, it's actually a lot like Nana Petite or any of those. Too much light, it gets angry. It needs a little light, but a little shade at the same time. Does that make sense? It likes some light, but only so much. Otherwise, it gets bad surface algae, and then it has trouble. Otherwise, you treat it like most Anubias. You just attach it like an epiphyte, give it a little bit of nutrients, a little bit of light, It prefers longer photo periods over intense photo periods, so you want a longer day cycle of less powerful light as opposed to a short period of time with strong light. You'll do just fine. Doesn't need CO2, but can go in CO2. Oh, chat jump. That's how I know I'm really far behind. Oh, man. SciFi Swordsman. Got lots of phosphates in a tank I service. Doing big water changes for now, but I need a longer-term solution. Ooh. That sounds like they're overfeeding the tank. So the real question is, can you teach them to feed less? You know, that's one of the things that I would look at. Because otherwise you would test your source water, and if it for some reason has a lot, that would make it a little tougher, right? But my initial guess is it's actually probably feeding too much. Tony, shouldn't you have a third Tony? Eh? Anybody? References? Chihiros has an awesome price point for great quality. You can get them on Amazon. Yeah, some of the lower entry Chihiros are pretty good from what I can tell. I've never personally bought one. I'll eventually do one. The one that I tend to look at the most is like the Vivid, which is their nicest, most controllable one. And that thing is not cheap. It's very expensive, especially considering that it's a lot like a UNS Titan and all that kind of stuff. It's designed to light a 2 foot by 2 foot area. So if you consider that on, like, say, a 75 gallon or a 90 gallon or a 120 or any 4 foot tank, right, you would need 2. Now you could raise it up and just jack the power up and probably be all right if you hang it, but yeah. Some of the Chihiros I've heard are very nice. I personally have not tested them just because it's like anything, man. There's only so much, like, fun money budget that goes into my YouTube channel, and I can only test so many lights at a time. So I kind of have to, like, pick and choose what I'm going to test. Chihiros is actually really high on my list right now of looking at one of the Chihiros lights to test. Probably in, like, fall or winter. Just at, like, the current timing of what I'm doing and what I have on my plate. But, yeah. I hear lots of high praise about Chihiros, so I'm hopeful that it's as great as you say. Zen Ginger, Bentley, or anyone, have you tried the new programmable Higer? Oh, well, I have not. I'm doing recon in case the Phoenix is toast. It's only $50. Curious about the quality. So in general, I've heard a lot of people praise the Higer pretty well, but I don't know that anybody's really had that Higer light for a long period of time. Like, has anybody had it for a year to know, like, whether or not it just, like, dims like crazy? Because at $50, I get worried that those LEDs don't have a lot of, like, staying power to them compared to, say, something like a Flugel or something, or even the Phoenix. Like, Phoenix has pretty nice quality LEDs. You just lose a lot of other features when they start bringing that price down. So, like, the controllability, dimming, all that kind of stuff, right? Like, the Stingray is actually a pretty high-quality light for how cheap it is. But, you know, there are plenty of people that are going, well, like, XYZ are cheaper and more powerful. Watch Saturday's video. Watch Saturday's video. That's all I'm going to say. Stephen P. I've been doing individual tank tours. I know I've watched a few of them. I just haven't commented because usually I'm doing it while I'm, like, crazy busy at work. So each one has a lot of B-roll and indigestible chunks. So I did that for a while. I had my Tank of the Week series that we did before we started weekly streaming. And most of those tanks haven't changed so much that it warrants me, like, going back and visiting them. That's my biggest thing. Alyssa Bentley. Hello, friend. Don't you have some vacation time coming up? Or ever? Do you know how hard it is for me to get vacation time at my work right now? I took one day off last week because for a couple of medical appointments and an appointment with my dog because I knew that I was working all weekend. It took me the next 2 days to catch up on everything I missed, and I still worked that same Tuesday. You guys remember, I was, like, literally working from home right before the stream started to get stuff done, and it still took me, like, 2 days to catch up on some of the other stuff. That's how insane my work life is right now. I probably will not have any vacation, because, like, originally I was looking at going to Aquashella in October. I'm not doing that. I don't know that I can get the time off because I have other members of my team that have already requested vacation in October. So basically, unless I somehow get more staff in that period of time and get them spooled up and trained, I need to be around to make sure that we can continue doing the work we have to do. They got me. They got me by the coattails. Dirty old farmhand. No, please give us the quick and dirty. Brian K. I'm thinking of doing an Iwagumi aquascape. What do you think I should use as a carpet? You don't want my answer. You don't want my answer. Because what I would do to carpet a tank is not what other people would do to carpet a tank. It's not a crypt. It's not Cuba. It's not dwarf hairgrass. None of those. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave you wanting more. One day we'll talk about it. No, actually, in seriousness, the one that I want to do a carpet of, and it's not a carpet the way you think about it, but if you have high enough light, it is a species of Nymphea that I had at one point and is now back in the Guppy Mansion. If you give it enough light, it stays low. Now, really, it's about mid-ground height, right? It'll get about this tall if you train it right. But it propagates by runners. So you can carpet a tank with all Nymphea lily pads. Carpet, in quotation marks. That is what I would do. Because I like doing things a little weird. I'm not an aquascaper. I'm a plant head. Right? I don't care about all the rules. The rules don't matter to me when it comes to aquascaping. My rules are like, does it look good to me? Cool. Like, I care more about making my plants healthy and look great than I do about making something that's like faux nature. I let nature do its thing. That's my jam. Raphael, kudos for setting the video quality bar high. I mean, it's like personal challenge. Have you thought about interviewing Jimmy and picking his brain about video shooting and editing process? So here's the thing. I actually talked to Jimmy about this a lot because I get help from Jimmy when I have like some questions, and usually it's him pointing me to resources where he learned certain things as opposed to him directly teaching me. Jimmy really does not like to do like teaching type stuff when it comes to videography and stuff because he has it in his brain that he's boring, even though I think he's like phenomenal. But his big thing is like he likes to create art when he can, as opposed to like try and do the more like educational side of things. And that's just the way Jimmy rolls, right? Like he'll help me by sending me resources or being like, oh, just look up this from this person, right? And he'll kind of set me on a path. But for the most part, what I do is I have a really analytical brain. It's part of why I work in the industry I work in. And so I'll watch what he's doing, and I'll dissect what he's doing in my head, and then I'll ask him questions about the stuff I don't know how he's doing. And usually he can point me like, oh, that's just this X, or that's just Y, or all I did was this to what what you would normally do, and it gives you this effect, or something like that, right? It's all these like little tricks and tips for someone who's been editing significantly longer than I have. Just Jimmy's really, really good at it, right? And he's constantly teaching himself. You don't see that as much now because he's not making as much of his own personal videos. But slowly but surely, when he brings out his personal stuff, you get to see little touches of that. Bob Purcell, can I get a good color and growth out of Crypt Pink Flamingo without CO2? No. I hate to burst the bubble, but no. You will never get that hyper pink without CO2. You'll get like striations of pink, so it'll look like green with little like pink tiger striping kind of down it. That's what it looks like without CO2. And the reason why I know is I've done long tests with actually significantly powerful light and less powerful light. Less powerful light, you won't see the pink at all. It'll just look green and sometimes never comes back. Because you got to keep in mind, you're dealing with a plant that is a genetic deformity in order to produce this. So It's not very robust and hardy. It has all sorts of issues. It's a lot like a lot of the white Anubias. You can just lose things in the white Anubias, or they can just die on you if they aren't given the conditions they like to produce that white in the first place, which sucks. By the way, it sucks. But yeah, basically, you could have light amounts of CO2. You don't have to have a ton of CO2. You can have a light amount of CO2 and get good pink coloration out of it, but then you also need strong light. It doesn't have to be like insane. You don't need like 200 par, but you need probably somewhere between 65 and 100 at the substrate layer. Ooh, actually, I see a question. I just want to make sure I didn't miss one. But, oh man, Jacob the Barber. What's up, buddy? It's good to see you. A little late, but you didn't miss us. Good to see you, my friend. All right, so I like this question a lot, and I want to answer it. Garvin, a carpet of Echinodorus species in a big enough tank would be dope. So, there are smaller Echinodorus species that lay flat, and they reproduce by runner. One example of this is the Hattie Red Pearl sword. Those actually, when they're happy and getting the right conditions, they lay flat. A lot like Crypnurii. So if you give them the right conditions, they will lay flat, and over time, and now granted, it took me 1.5 years to propagate that plant once, so they don't propagate quick. They propagate by runners, so they'll put a little baby over here, and you can get it just big enough, and then go down into your substrate and pull that baby out and move it. The other thing that you could do kind of low is certain Eriocolum species. So Erio is like Erio Vietnam and all that kind of stuff. Get that kind of grassy, almost pampas grass look. But yeah, certain swords. Another one that's really great is Echinodorus Aflame, which is not the flame Echinodorus, but Aflame. That's the also known as like the Purple Knight sword or the Purple sword. They actually don't get super tall, so you can have really, really cool stuff that doesn't get ultra tall. But for most of the swords, the cooler, neat swords, they're a lot harder to get them to propagate. They take a lot of time and patience. So a lot of times you're best off like buying them in tissue culture and just growing them out. But you can propagate them. It's just a pain in the butt. All right. We won't go too much longer. Is Dr. Black in the house? I got to make sure that he's coming up next, or that he's not like missing a stream. When I get into mine, I kind of ignore the rest of the world. Let's check real fast. Is Dr. Black coming up next? I can't type. Probably because I can't. I'm in a weird position. Oh, he might not be scheduled to stream. Oh, there it is. All right. I'll link this because Dr. Black is coming up next. He's up in like 5 minutes or so. But yeah, we'll do like one last question, and I'll probably be dodging out of here. We'll answer this shortly. Panda Anubias is any different like than Pinto in care? No, it's very similar. All the white Anubias has really similar care requirements. And they all have the same issue where they don't always stay true. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks. They're cool looking, though. They are so cool looking. Okay. Make sure. Hi, Darren. My buddy from Rogue Aquariums is in the house. For those that hopefully watch the saltwater oriented one, that's his beautiful, beautiful sump that he has. It's gorgeous. Jacob H., I want a boost carpet. That would be dope. If you could properly carpet like multiple species of boosts and mixture in the big leaf and the small leaf stuff and just do this like really crazy like epiphyte carpet, that'd be really sweet. Especially for like fish that don't necessarily dig too much. It could be really cool. All right, I want to find like one last question. It's all sorts of random. What does white Anubias like? All right, Alec the Nice, you have won the last question game. White Anubias likes a couple of things. One, it typically likes additional CO2. Doesn't need a lot, but it helps to have some boosted injected CO2. Really, what it likes is very intense light. If you shade it at all, it often will start losing its white color and many times never come back. It matters for that particular plant. It really is. Again, you're playing with like a genetic deficiency, so having some fairly intense light matters. Now, you can do this really easily in shallower tanks, like Alex is mentioning with some of his plants. That in chat there, by having that shallower tank, even a less powerful light becomes more intense because there's less diffraction, so you're losing less of that power to the water, right? However, if you're in a deeper tank and you're using white Anubias, you really need to provide very strong light or raise the Anubias up in the water column so it's not losing as much light. Because if it gets too little, it will go back to green. And many times with the majority of those white species, your Pintos, your Starlights, your all those things, they need strong light, and once they revert back to green, they never go back white. Certain ones you can get it to happen, but it's very rare and very difficult. And usually that's a matter of, because of how the genetic deformity occurs that gets it going in the first place, you kind of have to, like, think of it like you have to continually sunburn the plant to keep it that way. And once you stop sunburning it, it can often go away. And some of the things is like those variegated plants, some of them are much naturally weaker when it comes to displaying their color we're searching for. And once it kind of goes out of that mode, it never comes back. So yeah, you'll want some oomph, as we like to say, when it comes to your light, to keep all the whiter Anubiases white. Or pintoed, or marbled, or it's like stardusted. There's a million different like names for them. It's like Boost these days. It was like 35 names, and 30 of them all look the same. All right, guys. Dr. Black is up next. Go have a drink with my good friend, my Australian buddy. Everybody in chat, thank you so much. Alex from Secret History, good to see you, buddy. Darren Rogue Aquariums. Another YouTuber. We got several YouTubers. Stephen P, who's been doing some cool stuff lately. I highly suggest checking out a few of his like personal tank tours. Get to know one of the channel members. He's a cool dude. He's actually got some good videos for a Aquardix. That is so hard to pronounce, by the way. For a little while where you were like you had like the YouTuber in your name, I kind of giggled at it because it was like, yeah, he's trying to make sure people know, like, hey, I'm doing YouTube stuff too, man. I'm not just a viewer anymore. Anyway, guys, it's been so great to see you. Thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome. Watch Saturday's video. It's good. Do it. Do it.